Lovisa had once believed that she and Robin would have a happy ending. But just one day before their engagement, her boyfriend suddenly regained all of his memories. And that's when she learned that before he lost them, he was an undercover cop. Not only that, he already had a childhood fiancée. That girl came to her with teary eyes. If he had come back safely that day, we would have been married already. Please give him back to me. Lovisa stood there in silence for a long time before gently replying, "All right." No begging, no resentment, she chose to leave. She accepted a company transfer to another city, cutting all ties with the past. 3 years later, fate played a cruel trick. They crossed paths again on a city street. She was being held at knife point when the man she had once loved so deeply appeared to save her. She wanted to walk away quietly again, just like she did 3 years ago. But this time he wouldn't let her escape. Trying to disappear again without saying a word? The cold handcuff clicked around her wrist, just like him who had never really let go. A love story filled with hardship, where misunderstandings, separation, and destiny intertwine. When love has never truly faded, will they still have a chance to return to each other? If you love emotional, heartwarming stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's dive into a tale that will stir your heart and stay with you long after the last word. That evening, the sky poured rain, like icy blades slicing against her neck, sharp, wet, and suffocating. Behind her, the criminal shouted, "Don't move or I'll kill you." At that moment, she saw Robin again. He stood in full police uniform, slightly turned as he spoke to his colleagues. The rain cascaded down his sharply defined jawline, making his cold, resolute presence all the more striking. Moments later, he began negotiating with the man holding her hostage. "Tell me what you want." The man's face was twisted with rage, his voice distorted. "I want a wife. Give me a woman to bear my children." Of course, that was impossible. The rain poured harder. Negotiation experts arrived one by one. Someone accidentally triggered the man's rage. He snapped, gripping the knife tighter. "Since I don't have a wife, dragging a pretty woman with me won't be a loss." The blade dug into her skin. The pain was excruciating. Fear surged through her chest. She couldn't breathe. Then a gunshot rang out. The bullet cut through the thick rain, striking the man square in the forehead. Robin lowered his gun and rushed toward her. Lovisa clutched her bleeding neck, staggering as she tried to stand. The blood loss blurred her vision. Her legs gave out and she fell into his arms. When she awoke, she was in a hospital. Her neck was bandaged, but the pain still throbbed sharply. Robin stood by her bedside, his hair soaked, drops falling onto the floor. Lovisa's voice was weak. "The little girl I saw, she's fine. Her mother protected her well." Robin stared at her deeply. "That man had a knife. Even if you wanted to help, you shouldn't have risked your life." Lovisa tried to smile, but it tugged on her wound, and the smile disappeared. "Sorry, but protecting the weak is human instinct, right? The kidnapping had nothing to do with her. She was just heading home when she saw a little girl with a knife to her throat." The man had his hands tangled in the child's hair, pressing her down, making her cry in terror. Lovisa had thought of Robin. 3 years ago, when they were still together, he'd once gotten hurt saving a little boy, crushed by a falling billboard. 6 stitches in his back. She'd nearly cried in the hospital, knocking her head against his and scolding him. "Next time, can you make sure you're safe first before saving someone?" Under the pale hospital light, he looked up at her. His lips were pale from blood loss, but his smile still lit up his face. Protecting the weak is human instinct. Someone as selfish as her was left speechless. He held her hand and looked her in the eye. "But making you worry, that's my fault. I'm sorry, Lovisa." Back then, they had loved each other deeply, which made their breakup all the more devastating. Because months later, his childhood fiancée, Clara Mark, suddenly appeared before her. That's when she found out Robin had been an undercover officer. He had been exposed during a mission and almost tortured to death. He barely escaped, but due to severe injuries lost his memory. He's been with you for 2 years. I've searched for him the entire time. Clara Mark sobbed. I beg you, please give him back to me. She showed Lovisa everything. Photos, gifts, an engagement ring. 20 years of shared history with Robin. So Lovisa ran. The day she was discharged, Robin came with a young officer to pick her up. He sat in the back seat with her, his expression solemn. Lovisa touched the bandage on her neck, trying to make a joke, to ease the tension. Looking at the scene, no one would guess what really happened. It looked like she committed a serious crime, getting discharged from the hospital only to be escorted in a police car. Alfred's face remained serious, his tone distant. Aren't we just heading over to take your statement? The young officer in the front seat thought she was being serious and quickly tried to comfort her. No way, Miss Carl. You risked your life to save someone. HQ is actually discussing a commendation for your bravery. A commendation only? Lovisa smiled. What about a reward? For example, maybe a handsome young officer as a boyfriend. She glanced at the rearview mirror, spotting the young officer's ears turn bright red. He stammered. Before he could finish, Alfred cut in. Focus on the road. Eyes forward. Yes, Captain Alfred. Lovisa lowered her gaze and said no more. By the time the paperwork was done, it was already midday. A sudden case had just come in, and Alfred had to leave immediately to handle it. The rest of the team walked her to the entrance. Just as she was about to leave, she came face to face with someone all too familiar. Clara. She wore an elegant white cheapao carrying a lunchbox. Her gentle smile vanished the moment she saw Lovisa. Others greeted her. Sister Clara, bringing lunch for Captain Alfred again? He's really lucky. Unlike us, always stuck with cold takeout at midnight. You two must have good news soon, right? Clara looked down modestly, her expression shy. We're getting married soon. We'll send out the invitations then. A fog suddenly clouded Lovisa's heart. She pressed her lips together and turned to leave quickly. But Clara followed her out. She stepped in front of Lovisa, blocking her path with a sour expression. Back then, you promised you'd give Alfred back to me. Changed your mind now, just because he got promoted to captain.
No, Lovisa replied calmly.
Congratulations to you and Alfred. May you grow old together. Clara smiled with satisfaction. Thank you. On the way home, the taxi stopped at a red light. Lovisa glanced out the window and saw a girl who had tripped and fallen. Her boyfriend quickly scooped her up into his arms, holding her tight. A tear unexpectedly rolled down her cheek. Just one, but she wiped it away fast. She remembered the time she had known Alfred for 7 months. He had just rejected her third confession, telling her he had amnesia, no clear identity, and couldn't promise her happiness. Still, he went home with her to help pack her things. While they were packing, her stepfather came back, drunk as usual. He shouted, cursed, and lunged at her. She tried to push him away, but he slapped her and grabbed her by the neck. Alfred heard the noise from the other room and stormed out. He grabbed the man by the collar and yanked him away from her, then landed several punches. Lovisa lay on her back on the floor, staring at the ceiling, face blank. Her eyes blurred. She could barely see Alfred's face. Lovisa. He called her name. She curled her lips into a weak smile. It's been 10 years. This is the first time someone's ever saved me. Alfred's eyes flickered with unspeakable pain. He picked her up and carried her out the door. Don't look back. Don't turn around. He covered her eyes with his hand. You don't need to return to danger. I'll take care of everything. Lovisa, I accept your confession. The life of an ordinary person was already full of wounds. Lovisa Carl only occasionally thought of Alfred Lee during rare, Fleeting moments and the second week after returning to work, she was stunned to find her name trending on the hot search list. People praised her for courageously volunteering to take the place of a terrified little girl, becoming a hostage herself, calling it an act of bravery. But by the next morning, public opinion had taken a harsh turn. Honestly, I don't think that was brave, just reckless. She had heavy makeup on and wore revealing clothes. She said she was just getting off work. What kind of decent person wears a camisole and a miniskirt to work? Sure, the guy who got shot was pitiful. Maybe he was just a good man who snapped. Couldn't even get a wife. The online debate only grew more intense. Some reporters reached out to request an exclusive interview. At first, Lovisa planned to decline, but they told her an official representative from the police would join the interview to help clarify and counter the unfounded rumors. She agreed, only to discover that the official representative would be none other than Alfred Lee, the man who had fired the fatal shot that day. During the interview, Lovisa sat in front of the camera. Across from her, the male reporter posed his first question. Miss Carl, when you offered to trade places with the hostage and directly engage the kidnapper, what were you thinking in that moment? I wasn't thinking anything, Lovisa answered evenly. The little girl was crying so hard. I just wanted her to get home safely. So her crying triggered your empathy? Lovisa's brows knit slightly. The question felt patronizing. Next to her, Alfred Lee spoke up. His tone was calm but firm. As police officers, we do not encourage civilians to put themselves in danger. But Miss Carl's actions that day were undeniably courageous and should be honored. The reporter gave a perfunctory nod and glanced at his cue card. When he looked back up, excitement flickered in his eyes. The suspect you shot had a prior conviction for molesting minors. I reviewed the crime scene photos. His hand was on Miss Carl's abdomen. Miss Carl, what were you feeling in that moment? Lovisa's expression chilled instantly. That was an incredibly inappropriate question. And that kind of pain only Alfred Lee knew. He was the only one she had ever told. The microphone hovered near her mouth like a weapon. Did the child's cries remind you of yourself? Is it true you were abused by your stepfather as a child? A loud buzzing filled her ears. Almost reflexively, she turned to Alfred Lee. Before she could respond, Alfred stood up, his expression like stone. He stepped between her and the camera, shielding her from the lens radiating malice. We confirmed with your station ahead of time, he said, voice low but sharp, that the purpose of today's interview was to address online rumors targeting Miss Carl. Your last question is a blatant violation of personal privacy and has nothing to do with the agreed interview scope. The blinding studio lights were blocked by his broad frame. The glare faded. Lovisa lowered her head, holding back the surge of emotion threatening to break free. Faced with Alfred's firm and unwavering stance, the reporter faltered. Finally, he forced a stiff smile. Apologies, Miss Carl. Lovisa responded coolly. I request a replacement interviewer. Someone with professional integrity and basic ethics. Otherwise, I reserve the right to withdraw from this interview. The switch was made quickly. The man was escorted out and replaced with a poised, articulate female reporter who remained respectful throughout. Every question she asked was clear, direct, and on topic. When the interview wrapped up, the reporter shook Lovisa's hand and said earnestly, Miss Carl, please rest assured, once the draft is finalized, I'll send it to you for review before it airs. Lovisa Carl softly thanked the female reporter, then stood and left the room. Just as she reached the lobby, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Then someone gently grabbed her wrist. The grip wasn't tight, but the warmth and familiarity in that touch made her eyes sting without warning. Captain Lee, it's very inappropriate for you to be holding my hand like this. Since when is holding your girlfriend's hand inappropriate? Alfred Lee's gaze swept across her face and paused at her pale lips. His voice softened. You vanished after just a few words. I was afraid you'd disappear without a goodbye again. A bitter ache surged through her, like bubbles bursting in her chest. Lovisa choked on her words for a long moment before finally saying, We already broke up. That was you announcing it one-sidedly, Alfred replied. I never agreed to it. He paused, then added quietly, What that reporter asked today, it wasn't from me. No matter what position I hold, I would never reveal anything about your private life without your consent. Lovisa stood still for a few seconds before slowly pulling her wrist away. I know. But Alfred, whether you accept it or not, we are no longer part of each other's lives. She knew that much. There was a brief moment of pain, but her rational mind quickly returned. That private matter, though deeply hidden, wasn't impossible to uncover. That reporter could have found it through many means, not just by asking Alfred. He had always been a good man. That was why she fell in love with him in the first place. But later, when his memory returned, she realized that before he ever met her, there had already been someone else in his life, Clara. Even thinking of that name sent a wave of memories rushing back. 3 years ago, just before she and Alfred were supposed to get engaged, he had lost his memory and she had no family. They planned a simple ceremony, but he secretly took on part-time work, wanting to buy her a beautiful engagement ring. When I met you, you were the only one who made me feel whole. In the middle of a snowstorm, he had hugged her as she scolded him for overworking. He gently reassured her. I don't remember my past, but I want to give you a love that's complete. But the day before the engagement, he was stabbed while rescuing a woman from a mentally unstable man. He fell into a coma. That night, his former colleagues came to see her. They told her that Alfred had once taken on an undercover mission. Due to a betrayal within the unit, his identity was exposed. He barely escaped alive but lost his memory due to severe injuries. She stood there numb. A woman stepped forward, eyes red from crying. I'm Clara Mark. I'm his fiancée. While he was at his weakest, you took advantage of him. Did you really think he could truly love you? We grew up together since we were 7. He always said he'd marry me. If that mission hadn't gone wrong, we'd already be husband and wife. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Inside was a sparkling diamond ring. Her gaze slid to the thin platinum band on Lovisa's finger, its meaning clear as day. He doesn't remember his past. How could he give you a complete love if he himself isn't whole? Lovisa's mind tangled like a web. Something heavy weighed down her chest, making it hard to breathe. Still instinctively she spoke. I want to hear it from him. Miss Carl, the young man accompanying Clara interjected. How could you ask him that? Our captain was hospitalized again because of you. He's remembered everything, including his promise to Miss Clara. What more do you want him to say? Since graduating from the police academy, his entire life has been walking on a knife's edge. Please, don't make things harder for him. They showed her a blurry video clip. A birthday cake sat on the table, and the little girl, Clara Mark, was covering her face, her shoulders shaking from crying. Alfred, I have no family left, she sobbed. Alfred Lee sat across from her, eyes fixed on her face. From now on, I'll be your family. The word family was a heavy one, heavier than any fragile thread between her and him. All of it was just a fleeting piece of time she had stolen when he had lost his memory. Miss Carl, I beg you, please give him back to me. Miss Carl, your life is already stagnant. Please don't drag our captain down with you. In the end, she chose to walk away. A few days later, on the day her interview aired, Lovisa Carl stepped out of the office after work and unexpectedly saw Alfred Lee waiting downstairs with his car. She was pulled into the vehicle before she could react. What are you trying to do? She demanded. He leaned over to fasten her seatbelt with care and said, After your interview, I went to ask the show's producers a few things. Don't worry. I will get you a full explanation for the leak of your personal information. She didn't expect him to take her straight to the police station. In a small meeting room, she came face to face with someone familiar. The man who had come with Clara Mark 3 years ago to ask her not to make things difficult for Alfred Lee. His name was Luke Beery. Seeing Alfred's cold face, Zhonglei looked visibly shaken. Captain Lee. Alfred didn't mince words. A few days ago, you accessed archived files related to the investigation from 3 years ago, didn't you? You're aware you've been suspended for violating protocol, right? You don't have clearance to view classified information. His tone turned sharp. And yet you leaked a citizen's personal information to the media. Do you even realize the gravity of your actions? Before Luke Beery could respond, the door suddenly opened. Clara Mark stepped in, tilting her head and surveying the scene curiously. What's going on? We could hear your yelling from outside. Alfred turned and gave her a complex look. Clara continued sweetly. Brother Zhong, why'd you go and provoke Alfred again? You know he's stubborn. Just apologize, be a little nicer, and this'll all blow over. She walked right up to Alfred and looked up at him gently. All right, for my sake, let's not be so harsh. We grew up together. Don't you know Brother Luke's temper? He never means harm. Then she turned toward Lovisa, voice laced with mock innocence. Miss Carl, right? Lovisa stared at her harmless, gentle expression and couldn't help but laugh coldly. Captain Lee, she said, raising an eyebrow, voice dripping sarcasm. Did you bring your family here to put on a show? One plays the villain, the other plays the soft-hearted one. Quite the strategy. Alfred didn't respond. He just looked at Clara coldly. Please step out. I'm handling official business. Clara's expression stiffened for a second, but she still responded softly. Alfred. Clara Mark. His voice was ice. You really think I didn't know it was you who requested an in-depth investigation into Lovisa Carl, under the excuse of ruling out espionage? By the time Lovisa left the station, it was already dark. Under Alfred's insistence, Zhonglei finally admitted he had leaked her information. I just thought, if people online knew what she had gone through, maybe they would. Before he could finish his excuse, Lovisa turned to Alfred. I have the right not to accept his apology or his justification, correct? Of course. That's your right. Whether you forgive him or not. His actions were serious and will be handled accordingly. All right then, Captain Lee. Thank you for your fairness. She stood and turned to leave. Alfred followed. Let me take you home. No need. She stopped at the door and looked back. Captain Lee, you should go comfort Clara Mark. She ran out of here in tears. That might be more urgent than following me. He stood frozen, lips slightly parted as if to speak. Then his phone rang, interrupting him. She thought, perhaps what she and Alfred Lee had ended here. After the interview aired, public opinion slowly shifted, then settled. Life returned to its usual stillness. She didn't see Alfred Lee again for a long time. Not until a month later, after returning from a business trip to a neighboring city. It was the first day of winter, and the sky darkened early. Wearing a windbreaker, dragging her suitcase, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench beneath her building. The sound of wheels on pavement made him look up. Lovisa. His face was tired, eyes red. A few feet separated them. Autumn leaves twirled between them. Captain Lee, have you come back because there's unresolved business? She asked formally. Don't be so formal with me, Lovisa, he said with a pained smile. If it weren't for my job, I would have come here drunk. Maybe then you'd believe me a little more. She froze. Since he regained his memory, Alfred Lee hadn't spoken to her this gently. She hated to admit it, but she missed the version of him who had lost his memory, back when all they had was love and salvation. Thinking of this, her throat tightened. She took a breath, stepped forward, and spoke frankly. You and Clara Mark are getting married. How am I supposed to believe in your sincerity, Alfred Lee? Are you planning to hurt us both? His hair brushed over his eyes as he looked at her intently, not blinking once. Have I ever said? Before he could finish, his pupils shrank. A car horn blared in the distance. In a flash, he pulled her behind him. In the confusion, the car's headlights flickered wildly. The tires screeched against the road and stopped just a foot away. If not for his quick reflexes, she would have been hit. The driver stuck his head out. Sorry, Captain Lee. I didn't see her. Thank God nothing happened. I wouldn't be able to bear that. After saying that, the man with the long scar across his eyebrow gave a twisted smile, then started the engine and drove away. Alfred Lee said nothing more. He turned his back to her and stood motionless like a statue.
Alfred Lee.
Lovisa Carl called his name softly. He snapped out of his daze and said, Lovisa, I need to return to the station to confirm something. There was a frightening chill glittering in his eyes. She nodded in agreement. He turned to leave, but after a few steps, he looked back at her. Beneath his thick lashes, his eyes were red, bloodshot, as if stained with pain. He said, Lovisa, goodbye. On Monday morning when she arrived at the office, the department head suddenly called her into his office. You did a great job on your last assignment. The company's launching a new project in City B, and we'd like to transfer you there. If things go well, you could become one of the key staff members at the branch office. Think it over, Miss Carl. Lovisa Carl returned to her desk still in a daze. Her mind was a tangled mess, like a knotted ball of string with something unclear hiding in its center. Something she couldn't unravel. It wasn't until the company's celebration party that night, when she was completely drunk and stumbling through the hallway, that she found herself dialing Alfred Lee's number. Just as the call was about to end automatically, he finally picked up. Her voice was slurred and mumbled. That day, what were you trying to say to me? Am I drunk?
No.
The sound of wind rushed past her ear, like waves crashing on a shore. After a long pause, so long it felt endless, he finally spoke. It doesn't matter. You were right. I can't hurt two people at the same time.
I'm sorry, Lovisa.
I can only let you go. She crouched in a corner, hugging her knees. As he said those words, her fingernails dug deep into her own flesh. Before the pain could even register, a sharp instinct jolted her up. She trembled and said, But that day, that wasn't what you were going to say. There was no response, only the cold, repetitive beeping of a disconnected call. He had hung up. Lovisa Carl's whole body shook. Her fingers trembled as she tried to call him again. We're sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Less than 3 minutes. In under 3 minutes, the number had been deactivated. That night, their final encounter, the car had nearly hit her. Every frame, every detail replayed slowly in her mind. The driver's face had a scar slashing across one eyebrow. His expression seemed apologetic, but beneath it was a cold, mocking sneer. I'm sorry, Captain Lee. That's what he had said. He'd called him Captain Lee. Lovisa Carl shot up from her seat. Her head was still spinning from the alcohol, like waves crashing in the dark. But a terrifying realization surfaced in her mind, like a jagged reef rising suddenly from the ocean depths. She turned, using the cold hallway wall for support, and began walking forward. At first, her steps were unsteady, but she moved faster and faster until she was nearly running. Her department head stepped out of a karaoke room and saw her. Startled, he asked, Miss Carl, where are you going? Lovisa Carl didn't respond. She couldn't speak. All she could feel was her heart pounding wildly, blood surging through her like a tidal wave on the brink of bursting. Under the starlit sky, with streetlights flickering dimly overhead, Lovisa Carl ran down the familiar path, gasping for breath as she headed straight for the police station she had visited countless times before. Just as she arrived, she spotted Clara Mark, surrounded by a few young officers whose expressions were stern and focused. Lovisa immediately recognized them. They were the same ones who had stood behind Alfred Lee with guns drawn during the hostage rescue mission. The moment Clara saw her, she screamed, "What are you doing here?" Lovisa ignored her, eyes fixed on the young officer in the lead. "Where is Alfred Lee? What gives you the right to ask about him?" Clara shouted, stepping forward to block her. "I'm his fiancée. Didn't you know that? Don't think that." Lovisa raised her hand and slapped her hard. The sharp sound echoed through the air, leaving Clara stunned. She opened her mouth, ready to yell again, but Lovisa raised her hand once more. Clara choked back her tears, falling into silence. In her eyes, Lovisa saw her own reflection, distorted by rage and pain. Turning away, she looked directly at the officer once more. "Where is Alfred Lee? The undercover operation from years ago? It's still ongoing, isn't it?" The young officer swallowed nervously, his voice stiff. "Miss Carl, this is an internal matter. You have no right to ask." But Clara Mark seemed to sense something. She lunged forward, grabbing the officer's collar and screamed, "What do you mean it's still ongoing? Didn't you tell us he was only temporarily assigned to another city for a murder case? What does this have to do with that old mission?" Tears welled up in her eyes and her voice cracked as she continued. "You promised he'd never be part of another dangerous assignment. When my parents died in the line of duty, you swore you'd protect him. You all promised." Clara was sobbing hysterically, her face streaked with tears and smudged makeup. The nearby officers wanted to stop her, but hesitated, unsure of what to do. Lovisa Carl felt as if someone had torn her heart open. The pain surged through her body like a tide. Clara's shrill, wailing voice echoed in her ears. Lovisa reached out and grabbed her by the collar, her voice low and ice-cold. "Shut up." Eventually, under Alfred Lee's superior's orders, Clara was politely escorted to the police station. Lovisa was also brought in once again to that same small, empty conference room. Across from her sat a group of solemn officers. "Miss Carl," one of them said, "due to the highly classified nature of this mission, we're unable to share any specific details. What we can tell you is that Captain Lee is both a comrade and a respected teammate. We would never abandon a teammate or a citizen. We are doing everything we can to ensure his safety." "I don't want to hear poetic reassurances." Lovisa kept her head down, staring at a small scratch on the table's surface. "I just want to know, is he in danger? Or is the car that nearly hit me that day related to this mission?" The older officer sitting at the head of the table let out a soft sigh. "Miss Carl, you can choose to pretend you know nothing. Let Alfred Lee remain just a passing stranger in your life. You're young, beautiful, and talented. You could have a much better future. To be honest, even if Alfred does make it back alive, he's not someone suited for you." Lovisa's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "Not suited for me? So you think Miss Clara is?" Almost as if in response to her words, Clara's crying from the adjacent room rose in pitch, filled with heartbreak. The muffled sound of people trying to console her floated through the wall. The old captain gave a helpless smile. "Miss Carl, I'll admit, we did favor Clara in some ways. Her parents were both fallen comrades of ours, so both I and the entire unit gave her a bit more leniency. But if that caused you pain, I sincerely apologize. As for Officer Zhonglei leaking your personal information, he's already been demoted and given a formal disciplinary record." He paused, then continued. "After Clara's parents passed, Alfred became her only remaining family. But I know deep down from beginning to end, the only woman Alfred ever wanted to marry was you." It was true. Alfred Lee and Clara had grown up together like brother and sister. His father had died early. His mother, a police officer, died during a raid when Alfred was only 11. Clara's parents had been her colleagues, which brought Alfred and Clara into closer contact. After Alfred graduated from the police academy and joined the force, Clara's father became his mentor. But 5 years ago, in an explosion that rocked the entire country, both of Clara's parents were killed. We kept that news from her for a long time. But Clara's smart. She eventually figured it out. Lovisa sat quietly, facing the elderly officer whose graying hair only added to his solemn air. His voice was heavy with sorrow. She fell into severe depression, attempted suicide multiple times. It was only thanks to Alfred that she pulled through. I remember he once told me that in this life he never dared to expect peace. And that's why he never wanted to drag anyone else into his chaos. To him, Clara is family, and nothing more. But, he continued with a sigh, marriage is the only legal way for two unrelated people to become family. Given her condition and her unique background, we gave her a lot of leeway. 3 years ago, when we discovered Alfred was still alive, everyone was overjoyed. But at that moment, Clara's condition relapsed. We didn't dare risk upsetting her, so we let her go find you on her own. The old captain hadn't spoken this much in a long time. By the end, he leaned on the table and broke into a harsh cough. Lovisa instinctively scanned the room, then passed him a glass of water. He waved it off. No need, just an old cough. Miss Carl, you've never seen Alfred's desk, have you? He led her out of the room, passing by a group of officers preparing for deployment. As they walked past, Clara's sobs could still be heard, hoarse and broken. They reached a simple, tidy office. He pulled the curtain open, turned on the light, and opened a drawer. Inside was a small photo frame. The picture showed Lovisa in a fishtail wedding dress. Her brows weren't fully relaxed. She looked half angry, half pouting. Lovisa immediately remembered. It was taken the day she tried on wedding dresses before her engagement to Alfred. That day, the dress she had picked had been delivered to the wrong store. She'd had to wear a replacement, and she was so upset she argued with the staff. After adjusting the hem of the stand-in dress, she turned around and saw Alfred raising his phone, aiming the lens at her. She snapped, her tone annoyed. What are you taking a picture of? I'm still mad, you know. But he simply smiled, clicked the shutter, and walked over to hold her hand. You're still beautiful when you're mad. Lovisa Carl clutched the photo frame tightly to her chest. Her entire body trembled as tears streamed down her face without end. Tiny crackling sounds, like the fizz of breaking bubbles, seemed to echo in her ears, each one quietly shattering. Through the blur of her tear-filled vision, she heard the old captain speak again. Because the target is involved in illegal international trade activities, possibly even intelligence leaks, Alfred, who had previously witnessed and participated in related missions, was chosen for this top-secret operation. Even we don't know his exact whereabouts. Miss Carl, this mission is far more dangerous and complex than you can imagine. Once you leave here today, consider everything over. Pretend you never knew anyone named Alfred Lee. That was also the last message he asked us to pass on to you. When Lovisa left the police station, night still cloaked the city. Her face was expressionless. Hands tucked into the pockets of her coat, she walked quickly. Other than the redness in her eyes, she showed no emotion. But she knew. Only she knew that the photo, which had just been removed from the frame, was now pressed tightly against her chest. Through the thin layer of her shirt, through skin, flesh, and bone. Right next to the scar on her neck that hadn't fully healed, and the dull, tarnished platinum ring still worn on her ring finger. These were the last things she had left, traces of Alfred Lee. Lovisa walked alone along an empty street. Dew had gathered into droplets on the leaves around her. The glow of the streetlights slowly faded into the distance. Cars passed by, leaving only fleeting shadows behind. By the time she reached the intersection near her home, The sun had already risen. The streets were growing busier with every minute. She stared at an empty bench in front of her, motionless, as if someone had once sat there looking up at her. "I said I really wanted to have a few drinks before coming to see you," he had said. "That way, maybe the buzz would give me just enough courage to say I'm sorry." That night, Lovisa Carl drank until she was completely out of it, curled up with a bottle of wine on a velvet-covered couch. Outside the window, the moonlight faded gradually into the shadows. Through her half-closed eyes, she could still see the shimmering outline of the moon. In her haze, she dreamed of Alfred Lee again. The night she first met him had been under a moon just like this one, only slightly different. It had been her birthday. She got off work, wrapped tightly in her coat as the temperature had dropped below freezing. She bought 2 cans of beer and a hot cup of soup from a nearby convenience store, then sat right down on the curb. She hadn't even taken a bite when Alfred Lee, passing by, accidentally kicked her cup over. She jerked her head up, eyes meeting his cold, indifferent gaze under the moonlight. "Sorry." In that single second, a flood of images flashed through her mind. The 4 long months she'd poured into a project, only to have her efforts stolen. The sarcastic remarks and veiled insults from clients over dinner. The hands pretending to be drunk, brushing her thigh, and so many other things even more distant. Her rationality crumbled. When he pulled out an old wallet and offered to compensate her, she suddenly stood up, poured the rest of her beer on his face, and stared at him with a defiant glare. "No need. That's enough." It was the worst first meeting. She vented her anger at him, using him as a vessel for all the injustice she had suffered, blowing up a tiny accident into something monumental. Back then, she never would have imagined what would unfold between them later. She ran into Alfred Lee again a few more times. The second time was just before the end of the workday. He showed up at her company's front desk holding a steaming cup of soup. "Can you deliver this to Lovisa Carl for me?" His appearance was striking. Nearly 1.9 meters tall, lean and broad-shouldered, narrow waist. Even someone as picky and critical as her couldn't find a single flaw on his face. The dark sweater he wore was a bit short. Every time he raised his arm, it revealed a glimpse of toned abs. The receptionist brought the soup to her desk, unable to hide her curiosity. "Hey Lovisa, is that your boyfriend?" With a sharp description, Lovisa Carl abruptly stood up and rushed outside. Inside the elevator, she stared intensely at the name written on the coffee cup Alfred Lee had left for her. "What does this mean, Alfred?" she asked the moment she stepped out of the elevator. "It's for you." She hadn't expected things to unfold this way, and stood frozen for a moment. "You already paid me back yesterday." "Oh," he nodded thoughtfully and then added, "Yesterday doesn't count. You were just venting. What I owe you, I'll make sure it's enough." The elevator arrived at the ground floor. The doors opened, and several people waited outside. He waved. "If there's nothing else, goodbye, Miss Carl." He left. She was pushed into the crowded elevator. The cramped space was like a tin full of sardines. She had always lived like that, used to suffocating silence and quiet endurance. But in that very moment, something in her heart seemed to spark, as if someone had lit a fuse. After that, they started seeing each other more often. She learned his name was Alfred Lee. At the time, he worked as a food delivery driver, mostly serving companies and nearby residential areas. "You're too handsome for this job," she said one day, sipping beer, sitting backward on a chair with her chin propped on the backrest. "Ever thought about being a model? I could help you build your brand." This time he was silent for a long while. After cleaning the cup he had just washed, he finally spoke, his voice deep and quiet. "No. I got injured once. Lost a lot of memories. But instinctively, something tells me I shouldn't do anything flashy or too public." She had always known she wasn't a kind or gentle person. She was dark, selfish, extreme, and a little unhinged. Alfred Lee, even with amnesia, still carried a quiet sense of justice. They belonged to two different worlds. During their time together, it was mostly him being patient, accommodating her moods. Until one night, she had been chasing a project, trying to please a client with connections. For days she'd been drinking and entertaining, completely forgetting his one request. Come home. That night, he waited for her alone until late. Then he went out to find her. Under the yellow street lamp, the two of them argued. Even when angry, his brows were furrowed with restraint. Lovisa Carl, who taught you to live without shame like this? His voice wasn't harsh, but it pierced like a needle sliding under the nail, tracing through her veins, stabbing directly into her heart. It didn't draw blood, but it hurt enough to make her tremble. No one taught me, she replied. I was born this way. She curled her lips into a bright, mischievous smile and narrowed her eyes. What were you expecting from a girl who was raped by her stepfather since she was 10? Did you only realize I messed up today? Now you're disgusted? Regret it? Should have thought about that sooner. The sharp glint in her eyes made him freeze. She watched him, defensive and calculating, wondering what he would say next, planning how she would counter it, how not to appear pitiful. But instead, he stepped forward and wrapped her in a crushing hug. Hot tears fell onto her collarbone. Alfred Lee, who had never once cried, even when stitched up without anesthesia, was holding her now, crying silently into the curve of her neck. His voice trembled with emotion. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lovisa. It's all my fault. Please don't say things like that. Don't hurt yourself anymore. She stood in his arms, not knowing what to do. In truth, Alfred wasn't her first love. She had dated before, but none of them were like him. When they fought, she'd tear open her own wounds to weaponize her pain. But he cried for her. She opened her mouth, lips quivering. His warmth was both comforting and painful. Then he pulled away, reached into his coat pocket, and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate ring. He said, Lovisa, will you marry me? Only when she got home did she realize how much he had planned. Balloons, flower arrangements, star-shaped fairy lights. He had planned to propose that night. He still hadn't regained his memories, but the future, at least, was something he could see clearly. Lovisa, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. The rest of my life. 2 words that weighed heavily on the heart. That chaotic night, she pushed him down onto a bed of rose petals. Petals crumpled. Crimson liquid soaked into his shirt, staining his skin. His warmth seeped into every painful memory she carried. Lovisa Carl truly believed the two of them could live out their lives together. But fate was never kind. Right before their engagement ceremony, Alfred was stabbed by a mentally unstable patient while trying to save her. On the way to the hospital, he held her cold hand and tried to form words with his fading breath. Lovisa, I think I remember now. I'm a police officer. That one sentence, from birth to death, was the thread that tied together Alfred Lee's entire life. The news confirming that Alfred Lee had gone completely missing came just before New Year. Lovisa Carl sat on a bench outside her apartment complex, watching the children in the distance play with fireworks. The smallest child lit a firework, and a few seconds later, it spun and shot brilliant sparks across the frozen lake. She received a phone call. Quietly, she listened for a long time without saying a word. Then she hung up. She stood and walked over to the children. The little girl holding the firework turned back and asked kindly, Do you want to play too? Lovisa nodded. The girl handed her a sparkler. The moment the flame reached the fuse, the girl quickly stepped back and shouted, Throw it! In a matter of seconds, the firework exploded in Lovisa's hand. Pain shot through her palm, along with the acrid smell of burnt flesh. The explosion lasted only moments, just like Alfred Lee's life. Short but radiant. In the darkness, the children stared at her like she was insane, frightened, backing away. Lovisa Carl looked down at her bloodied, shredded hand and slowly smiled. By the time she was taken to the hospital, the blood had dried and hardened around the wound. The crusted blood mixed into the torn skin, making it look gruesome. As the doctor cleaned the injury with cotton and alcohol, he asked, "You're a grown woman. How did you hurt yourself with fireworks like this?" Lovisa thought for a moment before answering. "I just wanted to know, does getting shot hurt like this?" The doctor said nothing more, just lowered his head and focused on treating the wound. After wrapping it carefully, he spoke in a deep voice. "It's done. But if you have time, you should go to the psych ward for a checkup." Lovisa Carl lowered her gaze. Even though her wound was now carefully bandaged, it felt as faint and fragile as bone beneath her skin. From that day on, she could no longer clearly feel the world around her. Because the mission was highly classified, spanning multiple sectors and requiring extreme secrecy, Alfred Lee's name, like his comrades, was never made public. He vanished silently, just like all the other unsung heroes. No one knew. No one noticed. 3 years later, she heard the news. Clara Mark was getting married. The young officer who once served under Alfred Lee had now become captain of the criminal division. He said Clara wanted to see her. Lovisa Carl agreed. They met at a cafe near the police station. When Clara Mark saw her, there was still resentment in her eyes. Lovisa genuinely found it curious and couldn't help but ask, "What right do you have to hate me? You were the one who fabricated the engagement with Alfred Lee and used his name to investigate and defame me. You ordered others to leak my personal information to the press. Now that you're married, does your husband know you still think about a man who never even loved you? Shut up. That's a lie."
Klara skria med.
"If it weren't for you, Alfred and I would have been married long ago. He wouldn't have taken on that mission. He wouldn't have ended up like this. It's all your fault." Her words slashed like blades, cruel and merciless. A piercing buzz rang in Lovisa Carl's ears, her nerves snapping like overstretched wires. She stood up abruptly, crossed the table, and grabbed Clara by the collar, yanking her forward. "He's not dead," she hissed, every syllable carved out like stone. The sickly sweet scent on Clara's body made Lovisa nauseous. Her eyes were sharp as blades, cold and unforgiving. "Lovisa Carl, stop lying to yourself," Clara spat. "This mission was nearly certain death. You know that. If you hadn't been in danger, he never would have risked it." But Lovisa had never been calmer than she was at that moment. "He didn't do it for me. He did it for the people he vowed to protect. Alfred accepted that mission because he's honest, brave, and fearless. That's why I loved him. You, Clara, you called yourself his childhood sweetheart for over 20 years. Yet you never truly understood him. You clung to him like a lifeline, using him as a pillar to hold your crumbling world together. That's not love. That's dependency. That's weakness." Clara stood speechless, her panic written all over her face. Lovisa let go, straightened up, and calmly smoothed her wrinkled sleeve. "I recorded this conversation, Miss Clara. I'll make sure your husband hears it. You don't have to thank me." After that confrontation, she heard that Clara did end up marrying, but not to the man originally promised. How unfair, Lovisa thought. Someone like her, manipulative, cruel, petty, could still live well, comfortably. Yet people like Alfred Lee and his teammates simply vanished. Without fanfare. Without recognition. No one knew. No one cared. But Lovisa, she couldn't let go. She was still waiting for a flicker of light, a single miracle just to see him again. Then one morning the national news broke a staggering headline. A massive criminal organization operating in over 30 countries had finally been dismantled after a nearly 10-year-long operation. The names of those silent heroes were finally revealed. And there it was. Alfred Lee, at the very top of the list. His deeds, his sacrifices, everything he had done for the world was now known, honored. He was posthumously awarded the People's Police Hero Medal, the highest honor of them all. Lovisa Carl stood on a packed subway train, her eyes fixed on the screen displaying that list of names. Around her, people whispered in awe. Unbelievable. These people were real heroes. That Alfred Lee guy. He was really good looking. If he was a cop, I bet tons of people had a crush on him. I wonder, did he have a girlfriend before he died? If he did, I bet she still misses him. That last sentence like an arrow straight through her heart. Lovisa tightened her grip on the subway handrail, trying to stay balanced. But her vision blurred. Tears overflowing and silently falling. Today was her birthday, and it was also the anniversary of the day many years ago when she first met Alfred Lee. This year she turned 31. She got off the train at the next stop, not caring where it was headed. Something in her heart pulled her back. She bought a last-minute plane ticket and returned to the city where she and Alfred had first met. By the time the plane landed, it was late afternoon. The golden hour bathed the sky in vibrant light, painting the clouds in shimmering hues of pink and gold. She walked through old familiar streets, stopping in front of the convenience store where she had once bought her lonely birthday dinner, where everything had begun. The glass doors were a bit dusty now, reflecting her face faintly, but she didn't mind. She bought 2 cans of beer and a steaming black sesame soup, then sat down on the curb just like she had back then. She opened one of the beers. Foam bubbled up. She fumbled around for a tissue to wipe it, when a pair of leather shoes stopped in front of her. A rough, familiar voice said, "Sorry, I spilled your food again." Lovisa Carl slowly looked up. His eyes still sparkled like stars, just as they had always been. Only now his face bore a long scar. He knelt down and looked at her, gaze unwavering. "Sorry," he whispered. "I'll make it up to you. I'll make it up for everything. I'll give myself to you." Dear listeners, today's emotional love story comes to a close. If it touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel to support our team in bringing more tender, unforgettable stories to life. Wishing you endless joy, gentle days, and a heart always filled with love. Until we meet again in the next story, take care and stay inspired.